Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to Mason Cable Network's special Election Day broadcast. I'm Gabriel Yossick.
And I am Daksha Magesh. We have a packed show waiting for you today with interviews with candidates and professors, along with footage of election-based campus events and more.
Tonight, we're going to start off with introducing all the candidates in this election. We'll begin with Virginia State Senate District 35, which includes parts of Falls Church, Fairfax County, Alexandria, and most importantly, George Mason University. The Democratic nominee is incumbent Senator Dave Marsden. He currently represents State Senate District 37 in Richmond, which encompasses parts of Fairfax County. He was first elected to the State Senate in 2010 to replace Ken Cuccinelli, who was elected Attorney General of Virginia prior to the State Senate. Prior to the State Senate, Marsden served in the State Assembly for 4 years. He is currently chair of the Transportation Committee in the State Senate. Kaylee Fernandez was able to interview Senator Marsden ahead of tonight's election.
We'll just go ahead and start off with, if you want to give yourself a brief introduction, a little bit about your background, how you got into politics, and maybe why you're running for re-election.
I'm Senator Dave Marsden. I've been in the State Senate for 14 years. 4 years before that, I was in the House of Delegates and spent my career here in Fairfax County, working for 30 years for our juvenile court as a juvenile probation officer, group home director for kids with extremely difficult family situations, and then for 17 years, superintendent of our local juvenile detention center. Following that, I worked in Richmond as the appointee of Governor Gilmore and Governor Warner as chief deputy and acting director of Virginia's Department of Juvenile Justice.
So it seems that you're the chair of transportation in the Senate, and so you would say that transportation, jobs, and all these things are tied to housing. If I'm hearing you.
Very much so. It is, all of these things are very much tied together. You're seeing in cities around the country the frustration of young people showing up in carjackings. Transportation is one of the great equalizers in life, the ability to get around and to go places. For many of us, thinking about going someplace is never a big consideration. You just get in your car and you go. For many young people, especially with limited transit options here in the District of Columbia, we're not like New York City. Kids get very frustrated that they can't go to where they want to go. And I would like to see us develop where young people, college age and younger, would be able to use our bus system without charge. They don't use it a great deal now, and the ability to move around will also perhaps reduce some of the crime we're seeing with this theft of cars.
What policies would you support to address the rise in gun violence in our communities?
I had a bill that said basically, it's the only thing I thought I could get through a Republican House of Delegates, which we had last year, and that was to make it a traffic offense with a $500 fine if you get caught with a gun in an unlocked car. Because most of the kids will steal guns from unlocked cars. Sometimes they'll break in, but mostly they're from unlocked cars. And people put a gun in their car and they forget that it's there, and then they're shocked when it's stolen. But these guns are getting into the wrong hands, trust me.
Finally, I just want to turn our attention to voting and elections. So there are many organizations on campus concerned with voter turnout. As you know, we have a precinct right here on campus for students to vote on Election Day, hoping that will increase student voter turnout. What are you doing to protect and encourage young voters here in our district?
We need, student leaders to get engaged with making sure that they're turning the vote out in their colleges and universities, because some students, have to vote absentee because they're still registered in their precincts at home, which may be 2-3 hours away, and they don't get home on Election Day. And others, will vote in the local campus elections. And, I believe, and I would hope that every student would vote in the home, would vote in the precinct where they live when they're not at college. And if they live, at college year round or whatever, then it's fine, vote there. But we need to have young people voting in the place where their parents vote and in their hometowns. Because that's the way of truly understanding what issues are important to the communities that they have come from.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I hope this encourages people to go out and vote tomorrow. Just last thing, give yourself, if you want yourself a last pitch to GMU voters who might view this and vote tomorrow on November 7th. If you were elected for another term on day one, what are you working on?
I'm working on a number of things. The one is muffler noise. I've come up with a plan for police to be able to issue a citation for people who they think their mufflers are too loud. And if you don't go in and have it tested, or you get it tested and don't get it and fail and don't get it fixed, you're going to get $250 added to your car registration. I think we're all sick and tired of these loud cars that interrupt sleep and seem to be a mating call for people who want to drive like idiots to play cat and mouse on the interstate highways. It always seems to involve people with loud mufflers. So I'm working on that. I'm also working to consolidate our 24 juvenile detention centers who are vastly underpopulated. We have a 1.5 student per teacher ratio in these homes. And we need these teachers back in the community, and we can consolidate some of these homes. It costs $500,000 a year to detain a young person temporarily for a delinquent act in Northern Virginia. And the budgets between the Northern Virginia Detention Home, which serves Alexandria, Arlington, and Falls Church, and the one in Fairfax, on a busy day, we've got 50 kids in 191 beds, and our budget is $25 million. You do the math, it's $500,000 a year per kid, and we need to close one of those facilities and have them operating out of another one. You know, part of our responsibility in government is making sure that your tax money is spent wisely. And everybody knows what they want money for, but you also have to make the tough fight sometimes to determine when we've spent too much money on something and need to reverse course and free that money up to do something that's more important.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Marsden, for joining us on Mason Cable Network. I really appreciate it, and we're hoping that students will view this and soak it all in and realize the importance of the work that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Get out and vote. There are people around the rest of this world who would crawl across broken glass to be able to have the right that you have to choose who leads you at the local, state, and federal level. Never take it for granted. Get out and vote.
All right, so quickly before we discuss that recent interview, we have some recent polling news. David Belova with 74.4% of the votes, and Almira Mohammed with 25.04% of the votes. And how many are we reporting so far?
Only 8% reporting right now, but we will keep you guys posted on any forthcoming updates. So Daksha, what are your thoughts on the current polling numbers?
Well, you know, Gabe, one thing that really stuck out to me was talking about transportation. And that's something, of course, as students that we can constantly count on. And being an on-campus student, you know, I'm using the Q bus, the Mason shuttles, the metro, like very frequently. You know, what do you think? What has been your experience sort of with public transportation? Yeah, so Fairfax has a really good transportation network, as Daksha mentioned. We have the Q buses that run for free. They run for free now. Yeah. Running around Fairfax, but also in adjacent areas. And also we have the Mason Metro, the Mason shuttle system that takes us to Fair Oaks Mall. It takes us to the Metro station. Yes. It takes us to Arlington too, which is really nice. And then obviously there's a Metro bus system, and then the Metro itself. Yeah, and that's the greatest part about the Metro is that after finally a 50-year-long project, we finally have, the Metro extending not only to Ronald Reagan Airport, but to Washington Dulles on the Silver Line. And I know for a lot of people who live all the way out there in Ashburn that it is really great to be able to use the Metro to get home for the weekend. Yeah, so it is a very salient issue, I feel, among Mason students who live in the Fairfax area, transportation, but also in adjacent areas as well. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was the last legislative assembly also increased various service times for the VRE as well, and then also local buses as well too. Yeah. So it seems like the district and adjacent districts are very much
more transportation minded, which is a good thing.
Which
I would
is
say.
really good thing, yeah. Especially like, you know, an out of state student who doesn't really have a car, you know, and the suburban campus too. It's very important to have these sorts of things. I also thought it was really funny how he mentioned car mufflers.
Yeah.
I totally can understand that one.
Yeah, any Mesa student who lives on campus knows how rough the car mufflers can be at nighttime.
Or people cutting through traffic
Yeah.
through the university because it is a public campus. Oh my gosh.
So
10 p.m. and you just hear like revving.
Yeah. So it's a good thing to see politicians aware of that issue.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's very rarely relevant to us on campus.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So next up is Mark Vafiades, who is the Republican nominee for the 35th district. So prior to running for the state senate, he spent time in the state and federal government before entering the private sector as a small business owner. He also spent time as a patrol deputy in the Los Angeles County, California Sheriff's Office. He and his wife are currently residents of Annandale in Fairfax County. Right now, we have an interview with Mr. Vafiades coming up. Caden Garofalo sat down with Mr. Vafiades to talk shop about tonight's elections.
I'm a freshman here at George Mason. I'm glad I've been able to talk to you and learn a little bit about what you're running for.
Excellent.
Why don't you tell me a bit about yourself and why you're running?
Okay, sure. Now, first of all, I live in Annandale. My wife and I live in Annandale. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and then why I'm running. I've been in the healthcare field for the past 20 years. I actually specialize in electronic medical record systems, and I was an administrator for several companies, especially Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. And I've also worked for the federal government. I've worked for the state government. I've even owned my own small retail business. And when I lived in Los Angeles, I was a reserve sheriff's deputy. I'm retired now from that, and I worked in patrol for about 20 years. So that was my law enforcement background. And I've been an advocate for citizens and families for a long time, especially regarding government legislation and how that legislation affects families, because a lot of times legislators pass legislation without regard to how it's going to affect families via regulations, via increased taxes, and so forth.
Perfect. Well, I'll ask you a question off of that. You talked about how you kind of want to, how crime has been on the rise. What exactly would you do to help combat this in certain areas like Richmond and more crime-dominant areas?
When criminals are out committing crimes and they know they're just going to be right back out on the street to do it again and there are going to be no consequences, they're going to continue to commit more crimes and to victimize the citizens. So we need to make sure that DAs, the district attorneys, are prosecuting crimes, even small crimes.
What are your thoughts on climate change, and would you pass any policies relating to it?
The climate models have been flawed for a long time, and it is not true that there is a problem at all. We haven't seen that. As far as refugees, I know there are some that say, well, there are climate refugees. That's nonsense. There are no climate refugees. They try to blame everything on climate change, but it just isn't true. There's absolutely no causation and no evidence for that. So that's number one. Climate change is one of the, and you're not going to hear this from many people, but it's one of the biggest hoaxes out there, not only in the United States, but worldwide. It has instilled fear into people that have been taught that climate change is a coming crisis.
I'll move on to something that very recently happened, the Israel-Hamas conflict, big thing happening. And we've seen the rise, especially in local areas, of a rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and creating it with more death threats. How do we ensure that both Jews and Muslims feel safe and comfortable within the state of Virginia?
Yeah, there's a huge rise in anti-Semitism. That's the problem. There should be no Islamophobia, no anti-Semitism or anything. That you should not be discriminating or targeting people based on their religion, period. But what is the problem right now? It is not Islamophobia. There is no Islamophobia. It's kind of a myth. And again, if it happens, it's got to be stopped. But right now, we have anti-Semitism not only throughout the country, but throughout the world. And this is the big problem. For those who are students of World War II and the Holocaust, people kind of closed their eyes to it back then until after the war, and then they realized what had happened. Well, it's happening again. We have had protests anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish protests throughout the country and throughout the world. And this was, and it's unbelievable to me, because what happened is Hamas attacked Israel civilians. 1,400 Israeli civilians were murdered on October 7th. And now there are protests throughout the country and the world against Israel. So it's just unbelievable to me.
Would you support police resources or more police protection for, Jewish communities and Islamic communities, especially when they're trying to practice religion, when they've received threats from other communities against their, synagogues? Would you protect more police protection and more police resources to kind of look out for them?
Absolutely. The First Amendment in the United States, part of that is freedom of religion and freedom to worship how you want. We do not have an established religion in the United States. So we have to make sure and protect people that want to practice their religion. And right now, again, with the anti-Semitism, we have to do what we can to protect the Jewish people. And if there were threats against mosques and against Muslims, then we need to do the same thing. It cannot be tolerated in the United States that people are out protesting and calling for, death to Jews, death to Israel, and anything like that, and for any religion. So that is got to be number one in protecting our citizens.
Well, I'm glad you could come here. We could share your ideas with all the Mason students here, and I'm thankful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caden. Take care.
All right. So what did you think of that interview, Gabe?
Yeah, the candidate is a very interesting person who has presented a lot of different views on all sorts of topics.
Oh, right. Quick note that all full interviews will be available on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out. All of them that we're all covering throughout today will all be there. All right. So let's talk about the first topic a little bit that Vafiades kind of touches on, is like the issue of crime, and how important that is to keep our community safe.
Yeah.
I think that, again, we're a college campus. We have a bunch of students that are under our responsibility, and we have a police office on campus that is dedicated to keeping our students safe. Actually, as you guys know, emergency number is always 911, but the non-emergency number for the police precinct on campus here at Fairfax George Mason University is 703-993-2810. Again, that's 703-993-2810. And the police office provide so many, services beyond just, their typical job. They can serve as police escorts across campus if you're ever feeling unsafe, etc., or if you're injured. They can, provide transportation services. So do not hesitate to call them if you have any worries about your safety or the safety of others on campus.
Yeah, really, don't be hesitant. They're here to help you guys.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right.
So
let's move on to the next topic, which is that of, climate change. So what do you think about that, Gabe?
Yeah, so the candidates' perspectives on climate change is definitely varied, especially relative to other candidates in the field. As the interview showed, the candidate was very much against sort of the prevailing narrative on climate change, and that it is like a huge issue, and more so takes the position that it maybe shouldn't be, as prominent as it should be. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Or
yeah, so I think, students just need to keep in mind that, be aware of all opinions on all of these topics when you're voting, because it's very important to, consider every perspective, etc. And I think one of the most important things from this interview was that relating to the anti-Semitic and Islamophobic comments that have been made since the Israel-Hamas conflict. And we have a huge Muslim population and Jewish population here on campus, and we've seen a lot of them struggle and voice their opinions about what is happening to them. And something that we want to say is that all of this is valid, and at the end of the day, both sides are losing. A lot of things have been happening to people, and I think it's important for us to realize that, our students' voices should be heard. Their opinions and their feelings are valid, and that it's important as a student body that we talk to them and are receptive of their ideas. I, for one, have talked to a lot of my peers that are just so passionate about their topics and have protested. And, I really, really admire that, because that is a level of bravery and strength that is, really difficult.
Yeah, beautifully put. Everyone is suffering through these difficult times, and I think it's really important to emphasize discussion and a level head at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, take it away, Gabe.
All right. Now for Virginia's House of Delegates District 11 election, the Democratic incumbent David Belova has served as a representative of the 37th District of Virginia since 2006 and looks to extend his stay in this year's election as he runs in the new 11th District seat. He has most recently served on the Chesapeake Bay Commission, State Water Commission, Housing Commission, and Early Childhood Care and Education Commission in his time in the House.
Almir Mohammed is the Republican nominee who looks to challenge longtime incumbent David Belova. Currently attending medical school, Mohammed believes that there are core issues that must be prioritized, including increasing the policing budget, increasing gun rights, and affordable housing. And these were the two candidates that we gave you updates earlier, and be on the lookout for more updates.
All right, now on to candidates for the at-large seats on the Fairfax County School Board. Born in Clarksville, Tennessee, Cassandra Okwan is running for the seat in the Fairfax County School Board. A former graduate of Virginia Tech, Okwan is running as a nonpartisan in this election.
Born in D.C., Mary Brody is running for a seat in the Fairfax County School Board. Brody possesses a long career ranging from work as an intelligence analyst and an educator.
Sandra Davis is running for Fairfax County School Board. Davis has experience in advocacy originating in her experience in the nursing industry.
Born in Montreal, Peter Gabor is running for a seat in the Fairfax County School Board. His career includes serving as an educator and a software engineer.
Ahmed Hussein is running for a Fairfax County School Board seat. Born overseas, Hussein has worked an extensive career in the FAA and DoD.
Kyle McDaniel, a former pilot, is running for an open seat in the Fairfax County School Board. McDaniel hopes to ensure that the Fairfax County is a safe place where all students can reach their highest potential.
Ryan McElveen, a former member of the Fairfax County School Board, is now running again for office after a 4-year hiatus. McElveen hopes to regain his position to better his community and improve the conditions of students in the area.
Il Ryong Moon is a former member of the Fairfax County School Board. After stepping away from the position in 2019, Moon hopes to reclaim his seat and utilize his knowledge to experience from his 2 decades of previous work on the board.
And now for the final 2 candidates who are running for the Braddock seat on the Fairfax County School Board. Rachna Heiser is running for a spot on the Braddock District School Board after having experience serving in the Fairfax County Public School Board as vice chair for the 2021-2022 school year and chair of the school board for the 2022-2023 school year.
Priscilla DeStefano is a George Mason alum, go Patriots, and decided to run for the Braddock District School Board seat after seeing personal problems within the FCPS school system.
All right, moving on. Today, Julian Lee and Viviana Smith went around campus to speak with students and staff on campus about today's elections. They got to speak about the importance of voting and what Mason Democrats and Mason Republicans want voters to know, and how the voting process went for those who exercised their right to vote here at Mason.
Welcome back to the Mason Cable Network. I'm Julian.
And I'm Viviana.
And today, Viviana, what's today?
Today is voting day here at Mason. People are going out to the polls and voting for who's going to be in office for Virginia.
So we're going to go ask people around Mason how they're feeling about it, what they're going to do about it, and all around just get some more information. Viviana, are you ready?
I'm so ready, and I'm so excited to see if Mason's ready as well.
So I see that you have an I voted sticker today. How was the voting process for you?
Fairly easy. I got in at 6 in the morning and we didn't have to wait in line for very long.
Why do you think it's important for young voters to be out here in the polls today?
Because a lot of this affects us, whether directly or indirectly. And rather than letting old people decide who gets to, run what goes on around here, I'd like to, use my vote to make my difference.
So, did you just vote?
I did just vote.
So what do you feel is the importance of voting as a student?
Well, as a student, knowing that the age of college students is the lowest amount of participation in voting, I think that the more students that vote, the better that can be. And if everyone's sharing their opinion, then more opinions will be represented.
I feel it's important for everyone to vote because it's important to exercise your rights that you have here in this country.
Yeah, I just think it's the best way for our voice to be heard, to send messages and get policies enacted that we want.
NextGen is a new student org on campus that's focused on making sure students vote every year and they're aware of voter deadlines and voter registration.
What information are you guys trying to get out about voting today?
We are making sure that students are aware that they can vote on campus and also same-day register. So if they haven't registered to vote before, they can register using their campus address today and still vote.
Why are you guys out here today?
To just spread the word about Republicans, conservatives running here in Fairfax County. And I mean, we're just trying to make sure that the names are well known to the student body and also just voters that live here in this area. And that is what our purpose here is today.
Yeah, and for me specifically, my purpose is the pro-life issue. So I'm talking to voters about the abortion extremism of some candidates running and of the importance to protect life.
People need to vote blue because Democrats are protecting people's rights and are protecting the progress that we've been making in Virginia over the last decade, both up and down the ballot. Your Senate candidate and your state house candidate are going to fight to protect a woman's right to reproductive health care. And our local candidates are going to fight to protect our rights on a local level. School board is going to fight for the rights of queer and trans kids in our schools and fight for an open and free education for all. Our clerk of court and our Commonwealth's attorney are going to fight for real criminal justice reform and a real reshifting away from punitive criminal justice towards rehabilitative criminal justice. And our Board of Supervisors is going to focus on achieving housing affordability for young people so we are able to stay in Fairfax County.
Does your vote really count? What do you think?
It definitely does, especially in local races. These can be decided by only a couple of votes. Some of our primary races this year were decided by like 20 votes, so your vote really does make a difference.
And I think a lot of people think that their vote doesn't matter, but that's really not true, especially Gen Z. They had one of the highest voter turnouts in the last election than the previous year, so it's really important that Gen Zers know that their vote matters and their voice matters.
The more young people vote, the more we're taken seriously and the more that policymakers have to actually listen to us and enact policies that help us. So vote.
Vote, guys.
We're telling you to vote.
Vote. Do it.
All right, welcome back. So just looking at the polling right now, it looks like for the in the Senate, the Virginia Senate, it looks like there are confirmed or called. Washington Post has called 2 seats for the Democrats, 3 seats for the Republicans, with about 1 or 2 lean Democrats. And then in the the Assembly, there are about 20 confirmed Democrat seats and then 17 different Republican seats. What are your thoughts on that, Daksha?
Yeah, that's really interesting. We are obviously still at the beginning of the polling, so not all the results have come in, but it's very interesting to see where we are right now, and especially where our current individual candidates are right now. So if you are currently not also following on a different site, I would very much encourage you to use, for example, the Washington Post, etc., to be able to monitor what's going on maybe in your particular district if you are not directly from Fairfax County. Just a quick discussion over what we just saw. I think it's really cool to be able to see people on our campus voting in real time, voting today, registering today. And we'll get a little bit more into this as we go, but it's just really cool to be able to see students be excited to vote and be, exercising what, I know this might sound cheesy, but your civic duty, your civic right to vote, because, as one of the students said, that some of these votes come down to maybe 10 or 20 votes. Your votes really do matter and your opinions do matter. All right, take it away.
Yeah. All right. We were also fortunate enough to get direct insight from 2 of our esteemed Schar School professors, William Boring and Jeremy Mayer.
All right. William Bowling is a professor at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Prior to this, he was Lieutenant Governor of Virginia from 2006 to 2014, as well as a Virginia State Senator from 1996 to 2005. He is originally from West Virginia and has a degree in political science from the University of Charleston. Jacob Pritchard was fortunate enough to get an interview to discuss the elections with Lieutenant Governor Bowling.
So if you'd like to give a quick introduction of your background and who you are, real quick before we get started, that'd be very nice.
Sure, yeah, I'm Bill Bowling, and I am former 2-term Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. and now teach government and politics at the Schar School for Policy and Government at George Mason University.
Awesome, thank you. And what have been some issues that have been defining the campaign strategies for both the Republicans and the Democrats?
Well, that's a great question. Frankly, most of the TV ads and the material that you see from Democrats, it's all about abortion. It's all about alleging, truthfully or untruthfully, that Republicans want to ban abortion in Virginia. It's all about MAGA. Every Republican is a MAGA extremist, according to the literature and the ads that are being run by the Democratic candidates. On the other side, Republicans have tried to push back a little bit against that. Really, for the first time in the past, Republicans have really not said much about the abortion question, for example. But in this campaign, they're saying, "Wait a minute, we're not the extremists on abortion. We want reasonable limits on abortion." But it's the Democrats who are the extremists. They want to terminate pregnancies right up until the moment of birth. But those are the issues that have dominated the campaign. Unfortunately, neither party has really offered any kind of a vision for the future of Virginia, a contract with Virginia, if you will. Elect us, this is what we'll do. It's really on the Democratic side, it's been all about abortion. On the Republican side, it's been trying to push back a little bit on the abortion question. And we'll see if these approaches kind of resonate with the voters or not. I think both parties in this election have clearly run base mobilization strategies. The Democrats are just trying to rev up the Democratic base and turn them out. Republicans are trying to rev up the Republican base and turn them out. And we'll see today who does a better job of that.
Great. And I guess if we want to take it a little bit back to 2021, of course, the election of Governor Youngkin and the tenure of Governor Youngkin have been very important, defining traits of this election, so to speak. And a big issue for Glenn Youngkin in 2021 was parental autonomy in the classroom, both within school board elections, particularly in Loudoun and other places in Northern Virginia. And I'm wondering kind of how that issue's evolved throughout Youngkin's tenure and how it's really been shaping up with this election.
Well, Governor Youngkin has recently run some ads across the state on behalf of select Republican candidates, where he's talking a little bit about some of the things that he feels he's accomplished in the last couple of years. At the top of that list is restoration of parents' rights. So he certainly is trying to talk about that issue. Candidates, however, running for the Senate and the House haven't talked as much about it, frankly, as he has talked about it. And this election is very different than 2021. 2021 was a statewide election. There was a historic voter turnout in a gubernatorial election statewide in 2021. That will not be the case this year. Governor Youngkin won in large part because I call 2021 the revenge of rural Virginia. Rural Virginia really turned out in large numbers for Governor Youngkin. None of the competitive races this year are in rural Virginia. So it's all about these suburban localities. Certainly in a locality like Loudoun and Fauquier, Governor Youngkin did well there in 2021 on the parents' rights issue. And that issue has been somewhat paramount in a race that's taking place this year in Loudoun and Fauquier counties. But in other jurisdictions around the state, really not so much. Governor Youngkin has talked about it a lot. The other candidates really have not. As someone who spent 22 years in elected office in Virginia as a Republican, I've been a little disappointed, frankly, that the Republican candidates haven't done a better job offering a specific vision. Elect us, this is what we'll do. It seems like they've played more defense than they've played offense in this election. But again, Democrats have not done that either. They've not offered a specific agenda either. It's been all about abortion and MAGA extremists. So it's kind of an election that's been void of real issue debates and discussions. It's just been red meat. Democrats trying to energize their base, Republicans trying to energize their base. They both know in a low voter turnout election, these base mobilization strategies really are the key to winning in these very off-year election cycles.
Great, and I kind of wanted to get into, the primary cycle that occurred throughout this June. For those that don't know, the Supreme Court passed a redistricting reform for Virginia during the reappropriations process due to the inability of the General Assembly to pass one. And the primary system and the primary races that happened were very costly in June, with a lot of long-term incumbents, including Fairfax's longtime senator since 2008, Chap Peterson, losing to Saddam Salim. And I'm wondering kind of like how that primary cycle has really been impacting this race so far.
Yeah, it certainly was different than most that we see. You correctly have pointed out, because of redistricting, there were a much larger than usual number of incumbent Republicans and incumbent Democrats thrown into the same election districts. Republicans seem to manage that rather effectively in those areas where, for example, two Republican senators ended up in the same district. One of them retired and kind of deferred to the other one. But in the Democratic Party, we had some real knockdown, drag-out, primary contests, particularly in Northern Virginia. That did result in the defeat of a couple very well-respected, long-serving members of the Senate. You mentioned Senator Peterson, but also Senator George Barker in Northern Virginia, who was affected by the same thing. Those races could create some divisions within the political parties that were impacted by them, and particularly the Democratic Party. But in those districts where these primary contests, these divisive primary contests occurred, they're really not competitive districts. So even if there are divisions in the Democratic Party, for example, in those two districts we've mentioned, the Democratic nominee is still going to win those districts overwhelmingly because they're 60, 65 plus percent Democratic districts. So I don't think what happened in June is going to have a lot of impact on what happens in November. The biggest issue today, I think, for both parties is who does a better job energizing and mobilizing their base. The last time we had all 140 seats in the General Assembly up for grabs would have been in 2019. And in the 2019 election, voter turnout was in the 35 to 40% range. So these are low voter turnout elections. Now, on the other hand, the turnout in the gubernatorial race a couple of years ago was 60%. So these are low voter turnout elections. People who vote tend to be more activist, Republicans or Democrats. They will have a disproportionate impact in the outcome of these races today. And again, I think that's why both parties have run these rather red meat campaigns. There hasn't been a lot of effort to reach out to more moderate, independent swing voters. It's mostly been about firing up the base of their own political party, again, because they know in a low voter turnout election, that really is the key.
And I guess to wrap things up, the most important part of, or I guess the chief leader of party activism is the governor of the state, or whatever the chief executive of the party is, which is typically the governor of the state. And I'm wondering what role, Governor Youngkin is playing in this election, how much of this is referendum on him, and B, how much of Virginia elections in general are referendum on a governor in this, year before presidential cycle election.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in general, these types of General Assembly elections are seldom truly a referendum on the governor. These are usually local elections. They're driven more by local personalities and the strength or the weakness of local campaign committees and activities. There certainly can be times if you have a particularly unpopular governor or a particularly popular governor that they can influence the outcome in a district here or a district there. But largely speaking, it's probably not accurate to say that these are referendums on a governor. However, politically speaking, they're always viewed that way, right? So today, if Republicans retain control of the House of Delegates and win a majority in the Senate of Virginia, that'll be seen as a victory. for Governor Youngkin, and it will be. He will have a Republican majority to work with in the next 2 years. Likewise, if Democrats say retain the Senate or win the House, that will be seen as a defeat for Governor Youngkin. But in reality, nothing will change. You'll still have a divided government. So if we emerge from today's elections with Democrats retaining control of one or both houses of the General Assembly, nothing really changes from a policy standpoint as long as you have a Republican governor. There's still divided control. But if Republicans emerge with control of the governor's office and both houses of the General Assembly, that's a very different matter. And likewise, if Democrats emerge with control of both houses of the General Assembly, then the importance of the next gubernatorial campaign becomes great, because then potentially they could elect a Democratic governor to go along with Democratic majorities in the General Assembly. So it'll be interesting to see how today turns out. My prediction is this. Whatever happens, it will come down to those few districts that we talked about at the beginning of our discussion in both the Senate and the House, and it will be very close. Today, Democrats have a very narrow majority in the state Senate. Republicans have a very narrow majority in the House of Delegates. I don't think that's going to change. Whichever party emerges as the majority party, it's going to be 1 or 2 seats that separate the parties. I think in both the state Senate and the House of Delegates, it will continue to be very evenly divided.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. Your insights are greatly appreciated. And yeah.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right, and coming back. All right, so what do you think of that interview with Mr. Bowling?
Yeah, it was a really interesting interview, and thank you for Jacob for doing it. We're gonna talk about this as well with Professor Mayer, but a big focus has been on turnout, and especially youth turnout, and as we'll talk about here in a little bit. Youth turnout was a huge factor for the 2022 midterms. It was a huge factor in 2018 and 2020 as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, especially with the last year, with the so-called the expected red wave, and a lot of the important issues on the ballot, which we're gonna make a point in a second about abortion. This is the first time we have heard tonight of that topic being mentioned in our interviews. We haven't heard that from either of the politicians that we have interviewed so far, which is interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, definitely one part of it is that professors have more leeway to talk about this because you're obviously not getting elected, and especially if you're a professor in politics, you're obviously, some professors might have controversial opinions and still be able to retain their job. Politicians, at the end of the day, they have to, they're advocating for policy, they're trying to get elected,
and so public opinion.
Yeah, right, and so that might factor in, why they might not talk about an issue. But it's definitely an interesting thought, especially with how prominent abortion is currently within Virginia and nationally as well.
Yeah, and that brings us back to voter turnout, which is a reason why there was so much voter turnout in last year's election was because of issues like abortion that were so, I want to say controversial and, so partisan divided. And something that Lieutenant Bowling said was that this might not happen again. Lieutenant Governor Bowling, that this might not happen again. And that is the interesting part, is that, he said that the state Senate would, stay Democratic, and the House of Delegates would say Republican. I'm inclined to agree with him. This year we've seen, especially college students, be the smallest group of people that are voting, which is kind of surprising, if I'm not gonna lie. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's always volatile to assume where the sort of cards will fall with youth engagement. But I definitely would agree that, it's an off-year election, so already there's not going to be, a lot of people, but it's especially focused on, the state legislature, which it never really lends itself to being like a hugely popular thing amongst, students and all that. But maybe hopefully we'll see some more engagement along, with students and all that, especially with a lot of perceived major issues currently being discussed and being voted on right now.
Yeah. And again, it's really important that students know that they have a duty and a right to vote. Our campus tries to make it as important as possible with making sure professors are talking about it in their classes. You see posters about it, you'll get emails about it. We even have a precinct here on campus at Merton Hall to make sure students can register and are able to vote on the same day, like today. Earlier today, we had students registering and voting. And it is so important, even if you are an on-campus student and you're not a permanent resident of Virginia, that you can still put down your campus address and vote. And we'll get a little bit more into, into our, youth voter turnout and, how important that is with our next interview.
Yeah. So our next interview is with Professor Jeremy Mayer, who is an associate professor at the Shreyas School of Policy and Government at George Mason University and directs the master's and PhD programs for political science. He's an experienced author with multiple publications and books written in American politics and elections. He has also received multiple awards for his work in political science and has been a guest on multiple well-known media outlets. I had an honor to speak with Professor Mayer today, and I hope everyone learns a little bit more about elections tonight. Hi, my name is Gabriel Yossick. I'm here with Mason Cable News Network. I'm here to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Jeremy D. Mayer.
Sure. My name is Jeremy Mayer. I've been at Mason since way back in 2003, and I'm a political scientist who studies American politics, most especially racial politics, presidential elections, public opinion, a little bit of foreign policy.
On social media and on mainstream news, there's been a big focus on the Virginia elections in like a national framing. I was curious if you think this national framing will drive turnout here in Virginia or in other states like in Ohio, where there's a big abortion issue going on in the state right now.
Well, these are odd year elections, and odd year elections, or what we call off year elections, are the lowest turnout in the country. So only New Jersey and Virginia regularly hold statewide, very important off-year elections. And then you have something like Ohio, which is a referendum, can it happen? Or you can sometimes have a Senate race that happens in the off-year. But the eyes of the nation focus on these off-year elections when they do happen, because they are sometimes very important tea leaves as to where the country is going. And so Virginia and to a lesser extent, I think New Jersey get a lot of attention for this. Now, the trade-off, of course, is Virginia elections sometimes have very low turnout because the powers that be in Virginia decades and decades ago didn't want high turnout. They definitely didn't want high turnout from poor Black voters, but they didn't want high turnout from poor white voters. So the high turnout in 2016, the much higher turnout in 2018, and then 2020, I don't think those were signs of health in our democracy. I think those were alarm bells. So if we do see a skyrocketing turnout, I think it will be because Virginia is spending record amounts of money on this. So voters in swing districts in Virginia are being heavily contacted by campaigns, by the parties, by the super PACs, and by the sense that for all voters, the stakes just get higher and higher. I'll give you an example. Virginia has not had many elections where abortion is on the ballot, but the outcome of these elections could determine whether women in Virginia will be in control of what happens in their uterus, or if you're on the other side, whether fetal life will be honored. And those are very high stakes, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. The 15-week ban, though, is not that popular. It's really unpopular with national abortion rights or national pro-life groups. And that's because a huge percentage of abortions today happen before 15 weeks. And very, very, like 1% of abortions happen in what we call the late-term abortion window. The Republicans are divided and leaderless on what they're going to do with now that abortion policy has been returned to the states. And you can see that with politicians at the national level who are saying, we need a national ban. And that's the reverse of what Republicans have been saying for 40 years, which is that states should decide. Well, abortion has been a big issue across the country since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And with that one decision, they threw it back to the states. And states have been largely responding as expected. So very pro-life places like Alabama, it becomes impossible to get an abortion. Pro-life states like Ohio almost immediately made abortion illegal. But the interesting thing is when it's a referendum, when you don't have personalities and politicians, voters in places like Kansas, voters in the first bite at this in Ohio, and in purple and some conservative places, they've been largely pro-choice. So what's also interesting, though, in Virginia, Youngkin has been an incredibly successful governor so far, and he's a Republican, and he's mostly pro-life. And so if the Republicans can duplicate his success at defeating McAuliffe and continuing that squelching of abortion, which he succeeded. Of course, it's important to remember, Youngkin was on the ballot before Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Do you think there's any credence into this idea that if Republicans win big in Virginia, that he might have a shot at the presidency?
Well, put it this way. If he doesn't win big, he has almost no shot for 2024 because his window is closing. The inability of Republicans to wound Trump, the challengers, and put a dent in him means that the only way Youngkin gets this nomination is if, say, the establishment of the Republican Party somehow convinces Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and Chris Christie and the remaining candidates to mostly bow out and a savior comes in. But even that scenario is hard to imagine because Youngkin would then be Mr. Establishment versus Trump the outsider. And that would be a really good narrative for Trump. Now, Trump could stumble badly. It might start to matter to Republicans that he's got 92 indicted charges, facing 4 separate criminal charges, plus a civil lawsuit that may ruin him in business forever. So far, seems to have just made him more popular with Republicans. And what a sad commentary that is. But that could happen, and in which case, Youngkin could jump in, and if Trump wasn't there, there's a stronger march to the nomination. But my feeling is that Youngkin has missed his moment by standard norms, and he's positioning himself for a cabinet position if a Republican wins, maybe for a Senate race if a Republican loses, and then a presidential run in 2028.
You mentioned earlier that the primary season was a bit of a bloodbath in terms of incumbents being axed. Where would you recommend students who are interested in politics, like how to enter politics, especially in the direction Virginia politics is heading, where it seems like it's more encouraging of newer faces?
So there are people your age and younger doing opposition research, which often at the state level is just going to the other candidates' rallies with a camera and making sure everything she says is taped. Because if she makes a mistake and says something angry or stupid, you got video and then you got a campaign ad. You got something you can show reporters. So there are jobs for young people. So the smaller the stakes, the smaller the district, the more likely an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old is going to be given a position of actual responsibility. So look to state politics, look to local politics, prove yourself. The nice thing about politics is talent is recognized. If you devote yourself and you're good, you can rise pretty damn quick in politics, and it's exciting. And you won't get a lot of sleep, but you can have amazing experiences.
Well, I believe that's going to be it. I appreciate it, Professor. All right, welcome back. Sorry for the long ad break. I hope you enjoyed it. We were just having some small technical issues, but we'll go ahead anyways and talk about the interview a little bit. Since I was the one who interviewed Professor Mayer, I can definitely go on about some of the things we talked about.
Tell us a little bit about your experience. I mean, It's been a while since I had him. I had him my freshman year. But yeah, you said you had him last
Yeah,
year.
I had him last semester. He's a really good professor. Highly recommend for any government, Mason students to take. Professor Mayer. He teaches Inter-American government. Very, very, very good professor and lecturer.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit more about like your experience interviewing him and like his opinions on this year's election.
Yeah. So a very prominent topic, I guess we talked about in an interview, and as many of the people at home saw, we talked about youth engagement. But I feel like he had a very interesting characterization of youth engagement, in that it was like a negative thing, because a lot of and this is what Professor said, a lot of young youthful people like us, students, believe that are worried, they're anxious about their future, and that's what's driving them to the polls. That's why we're seeing an increase within youth voters, is because they're anxious about their future, whether it be issues relating to abortion or climate change or the state of the economy. There's a lot of anxiety among student voters. And so what I wanted to ask you, since you saw the interview, I was curious, do you think this is a fair characterization of youth voting turnout, I guess?
I think it's an acceptable characterization of youth voter turnout, because I definitely agree that students are worried about their future. I do think that, we are right to be worried about our future. There's a lot of things going on, and our generation is currently one of the most historically politically active. And so I understand, but it's a counterpoint. I also think that that worry that this might be a bad thing creates a narrative that tells students or young people that they should be worried about their future. And when that narrative is being given to them, that is what they follow, instead of maybe being like passionate or emboldened to go forward and make those changes. And I think youth voter turnout is a good thing, even if it's kind of stimulated because of that sort of worry. That shows civic engagement, that shows interaction with our communities, which is like the biggest thing. I know it's not fair to sometimes hold our generation responsible for these kinds of things, because it's like a lot on our shoulders to be the people who are supposed to make the next generation better, but if not us, who?
Exactly. And I think you struck a really good point, that civic, engaging your civic right isn't a bad thing. And while there might be like a negative connotation around voting and the environment we're currently in, Professor Mayer mentioned this, that this is like a reflex that we're always going to have as students. And just to put a pause on this discussion, because I want to circle back to this, because I'm enjoying this discussion. I want to announce some new breaking news, some new polling results. So currently, for the state senate of the 35th district here in Fairfax, Dave Marston is polling at 29%, while his Mark Villafidas is polling at 7%. Meanwhile, on the flip side, for the districts, for the House of Delegates, Belova is polling at 72.9%, while Mohammed is polling at 29%. Of the current polling. So currently, it looks like Marston is polling behind Villafidas, and Belova is polling ahead of Mohammed. What are your thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah, I think that, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself when I say this here, but a very small percentage of the voters have been counted.
Just want to emphasize that.
So we are still not quite, we are seeing high volumes. Like we just saw earlier today that that Marsden was pulling way ahead, and now we see Vafiata is pulling way ahead as well. So I think we're just going to have to wait. It seems to be I think it's going to be a close call.
The district itself is very blue, so I think
right.
So
for the Senate, 35th
for both districts, I believe are fairly blue. So I think, and it hasn't been called yet. I don't think on any sort of major news networks either way. But I would probably say it's safe to say that both Marsden and Belova are probably going to win their seats. However, very early in the night, the polls only closed about like an hour or two beforehand. So
So even though right now it seems to be very turbulent, I do think, however, like we have seen some students say, these races are going to be decided by a smaller variety, like majority of votes. Even if that does mean, I agree with you that I think a couple of candidates are going to pull ahead. but we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's a wait and see type of game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the sort of, and them sort of mentioned some other races nearby.
Yeah.
But just to end this sort of discussion, before we, later on we'll share more on
let's
this.
circle back to Professor Mayer.
But on Professor Mayer, and then after that, I want to circle to maybe some other races to keep an eye on.
Yes.
But to circle back to Professor Mayer, as we talked about his characterization of youth voting turnout, was
That's a really interesting take.
It was.
I haven't heard of that before.
But what I want to focus on now is Youngkin's future, because in the interview I talked about how there is a national framing around Governor Youngkin's sort of position in Virginia, where a lot of people believe that if Republicans pull a victory in the Senate and keep the lower house, that Youngkin is poised for the presidency. Do you sort of believe any of this sort of talk, or do you think it's sort of just hype, unnecessary hype, and sort of
I mean, I do believe a lot of it is hype. We do have some very, aggressive or poised Republican candidates for the presidency this upcoming year. But I do think that with Youngkin, I think he has a strong candidacy, but I think that, when it comes to his future, I wouldn't say that it's number one, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think we do have some other candidates that are striving a little bit or are a little bit ahead. And I think that Youngkin so far has definitely resonated with a certain group of Virginia voters, but I think that has precedence to change, especially with this election today.
Yeah, no, Youngkin has been we're seeing now nationally that a lot of suburbs, which used to be Republican, trending towards Democrats.
Yeah.
But it seemed like Youngkin was really able to sort of pump the brakes on that and sort of capture the suburban vote here in Virginia, which is really a really big vote, especially in Nova, but also around Richmond, but also around Roanoke and Southern Virginia. So it's him, and that's why the Republicans really want him to be on the, or at least some Republicans really want him to be on the presidential ticket, because he's moderate. He's a lot of suburban voters can rally around Youngkin because he doesn't hold a position people consider to be too crazy.
Yeah. And also that's also the huge case with the public school system in this area is because of a Republican narrative or agenda for parents to be very involved in their education, and that's something Virginia voters have gone for traditionally in the past few years, or past year really, with his election. But I have to say that I'm curious to see where he will go, because but what do you think based on what Professor Mayer said about his future? Yeah, so Professor Mayer, he was very, very glib about the whole thing. I think, he didn't really want to really put his eggs in one basket or another, which is fair, because like I said, it definitely is a hype around, Governor Youngkin and running for the presidency. And so he didn't really want to put his eggs in a basket, but he did say that, that it's a very complicated issue, and that there's not necessarily going to be even if Republicans do win, even if Youngkin does throw his hat in the ring, it still is somewhat late for the presidency for him, just in terms of signing up for maybe state primaries and just for getting his foot in the door. It's a little bit late for that. We are closing the door on 2023 in the next month, which is insane, right? Yeah. So, and starting 2024, you're gonna have all these candidates finally really come out into the open with their campaign strategies and et cetera. And I think we'll be able to see who comes out on top, and maybe Youngkin's a little bit late to that race. Yeah. And then sort of one last point, I guess, on this interview. We once again talked about abortion, which, as we mentioned, none of the candidates really, talked about so much. Yeah. And so I asked Professor Mayer, I don't believe the interview got cut before then, but I'll sort of reiterate my question and his response. Check it out on YouTube. Yeah, the full thing is on YouTube. So go ahead and watch the full interview. I would recommend it. Really enlightening. But I asked the professor, if the Republicans win the Senate and have a full control of the legislature and the governorship, if they would pass a ban on abortion, but the Republicans have angled for a 15-week ban on abortion. I asked them if they would stay true to this or would go further, because I believe there have been cases like in North Carolina where
Republicans ran on like a smaller number, but then ended up going for a larger number because they had like a super majority, just more seats. So I was just curious about what your thoughts were on that, I guess.
I think, though, here's the thing, that Virginia, especially, well, the Nova area has always leaned very blue, right? But Virginia as a whole is a very much purple, a swing state.
Purple.
So I feel like if you go beyond, I think if Youngkin and Republicans know that going beyond or sticking to that, if going beyond that is pretty much a call for disaster, in my opinion, and what's going on. It's pretty much a call to, it's not going to sit well with, Virginia Democrats. And I think that would be a mistake to go beyond what they already have in place.
Yeah, no, that's a really solid point, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we can probably start moving on to,
yeah,
to the next point.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Mayer, for being able to sit with us.
Yeah.
And now we are bringing to you a student interview right after this commercial break from a Shar School student who is here to tell us a little bit about his thoughts on tonight's elections.
There's a one hit out towards right field. They'll wave the run home. Here comes the Ponte. Here comes the throw. It is not in time. George Mason wins.
You're listening live to Improv for Mason here on WGMU Radio, heard WGMUradio.com.
It wasn't my idea.
Today's show with our special guest interview for this team in the new conference.
Welcome to a special
It's been
edition of the
a
First
great
Pick.
transition for me personally. I love Mason.
The very talented David Keckner.
Great. How are you doing?
Reed, Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today.
I did.
I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have Drew McGarry, successful author, writer. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMUradio.com.
There's the one hit out towards right field. They'll wave the run home. Here comes the Ponte. Here comes the throw. It is not in time. George Mason wins.
All right, we have a Shar School student in the room with us right now. Could you please introduce yourself?
Of course. So regular MCN viewers probably know me. I'm Shreyas Adicherla. I am a Shar School student, along with being the news director here at MCN. But I'm just as passionate as y'all are about the ongoing elections and things that are happening across not just Virginia, but the entire country. In terms of democracy and just elections in general. So it's great to be with y'all.
Yeah,
Thank you
for
so
being here.
much. Yeah,
Of course,
we see you on this side of the camera this time.
Yes. Not the one interviewing this time. Yeah.
Yeah, you actually filmed a lot of the footage that we have today,
Yes.
or all the interviews of the students.
Yes, it was extremely great to not just converse with like the fellow peers that I have at the school, but also hear the youth perspective on why democracy and voting is a very important like civic engagement activity.
Sure.
We learned that at the Shar School from like bang from the start. So when I came here as a freshman, I joined in the democracy lab. And in the democracy lab, as the name entails, we talk a lot about democracy. My first class was like a democracy 101 class.
Yeah.
And we just talked about like why civic engagement is important, what entails civic engagement, what is the state of democracy. You know, all of these things are so ingrained into us in the Shar School. It's always a great opportunity to converse with students and keep that dialogue going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Democracy Lab is actually having a watch party right now, and I hope they're running
yeah.
this. Hi, guys. So, shout out.
Shout out to the Democracy Lab. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Democracy Lab is extremely unique because it is a learning community, a live and learn community. You live with your peers, and I'll say the halls can get crazy, but you do live with them, you do learn with them, and it's an incredible opportunity to not just learn about civic engagement, but how you can use it in your everyday life. So yeah, it's always a good thing.
So here's the test. Did you actually go out and vote today?
Yeah, of course I did. Of course I did. I don't have the sticker on me currently.
Okay.
Of course I did, and. You know, it's something that everybody should do. The best thing is we have a Merton Hall precinct, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just go straight to Merton
right
Hall.
behind us, actually.
Yeah, it's literally right there.
Right there.
Yeah, so like Merton Hall is, it's like so convenient for on-campus students to just go in, vote, and come out quite easily. They make it actually very friendly for students because it is definitely a student
centric.
Yeah, very student centric. So it makes it extremely simple for students to come in. If you're an out-of-state student like me, they give you some pointers. I've lived at Mason for a while now, so I can vote here. So it's been a great learning experience as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm an out-of-state student too,
Right,
so I vote back home in Seattle.
Perfect.
You know, in my home state. But yeah, I'm really appreciative of the fact that we have so many, you know, voter and student voting centers and places for people to learn about it, which is so cool.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Especially, so this was, I think, my first time voting was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And even though I've never voted in my home state, Arkansas, I have been like within the political discourse that happens in the area, knowing that Arkansas is a very red state. So coming to Virginia,
for sure,
going from rural to pretty
different,
suburban,
yeah.
you're right next to DC. You get so much exposure to more democratic and more blue state vibes here. I would say it was almost like a culture shock coming here. like people call me little country boy, and I was like,
oh my gosh,
I was like, this place is crazy. I'm like, I had to drop my southern accent. I had to come here.
Oh, you actually had an Arkansas accent?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I lived
okay.
in Arkansas almost my whole life. I came here from India in 2000.
Okay.
8, so it's been a while.
Where in Arkansas? Little Rock or?
Of course, Little Rock. Yeah, I mean, it is the one suburban city.
Yeah.
Bentonville. So over there, we do live more in the city there. Yeah.
Okay, and so that's curious. So you did live in the city in Arkansas, but it was just vastly different from Nova then.
Yeah. So I would say Little Rock does tend to vote blue barely, but it does tend to vote blue barely, but it still has a lot of like unique aspects, and I can probably talk about it in the sense with Nova, but I would say just the voting experience in general is what I think I gained most while living here. The Shar School also gave me that like special opportunity to learn not just with like the amazing professors here, like Bill Bowling, who we had an interview with. I did have a class with him last semester.
Oh, there you go.
Administrative policy, and even though he was the former Republican lieutenant governor, you get to learn a lot, and that's why I really love the Shar School, and it was really good talking to y'all here today.
Yeah,
of course.
Thank you so much. It was so great to hear a little bit about experience from a student. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for letting us grace your desk here.
Of course,
Yeah, I hope we're doing a good job.
And I'll announce it. Now we'll head to an ad break before we head to Jeff Carberry.
There's a one hit out towards right field. They'll wave the run home. Here comes the Ponte. Here comes the throw. It is not in time. George Mason wins.
You're listening live to Improv for Mason here on WGMU Radio, heard WGMUradio.com.
You know, it wasn't my idea.
Today's show with our special guest interview for this team in the new conference.
Welcome to a special
It's been
edition of the
a
first
great
pick.
transition for me personally. I love Mason.
The very talented David Keckner.
I'm great. How are you doing?
Reed, Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thanks, dude.
I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have Drew McGarry, successful author, writer. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMUradio.com.
You're listening live to Improv for Mason here on WGMU Radio, heard WGMUradio.com.
You know, it wasn't my idea.
Today's show with our special guest interview for this team in the new conference.
Welcome to a special
It's been
edition of the
a
first
great
pick.
transition for me personally. I love Mason.
The very talented David Keckner.
I'm great. How are you doing?
Reed, Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thanks, dude.
I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have Drew McGarry, successful author, writer. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMU Radio.
There's a one hit out towards right field. They'll wave the run home. Here comes the Ponte. Here comes the throw. It is not in time. George Mason wins.
Oh!
All right, and we're back with another student from the Shar School. Just get a little bit more perspective. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hi, I'm Jeff Carberry. I'm a sophomore here at the Shar School for Policy and Government here at George Mason. While my interests more in line with like foreign policy and stuff like this, I definitely have very much interest here in elections-wise here in the United States. We know that this isn't a huge election, but it's still a big election here in Virginia. I'm not from Virginia, I'm from Pennsylvania, so I'm used to voting in a big swing state as compared to Virginia, maybe not as much of a swing state anymore. But these elections will definitely be important for upcoming elections. We know we have national figures here, Tim Kaine and Governor Glenn Youngkin, so we definitely have national figures here in Virginia, here in Northern Virginia, who will make their mark. And a lot of politicians who start off in state legislative elections work their way up to the forefront of national elections down the road. So it'll be definitely important to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, got to put you to the test. Did you vote? How did that go?
I did vote. I voted back in my home state of Pennsylvania, so by mail ballot. I sent that in last month, I think, something like that.
Well ahead.
We don't have as big elections as we do down here in Virginia. Our biggest election in Pennsylvania this year is the vacancy on the Supreme Court. We have vacancy on the Supreme Court, so a close election there.
Yeah, that's important.
It will definitely. Right now, Democrats control the Supreme Court. This election won't tilt the balance either way. The Democrats will still control the Supreme Court afterwards, but this does have a big impact on abortion rights here in Pennsylvania. Well, there in Pennsylvania, not here. But it will be important. The other important election was the mayoral election in Philadelphia. I live very close to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is getting a new mayor. They do have a winner now, so congratulations to Cheryl Parker on being the first woman elected mayor of Philadelphia, as well as being the first black woman by being the first woman elected mayor of Philadelphia in that race. So
woohoo, women of color.
Yeah, that's a shocker that you haven't elected a black woman for Philadelphia.
Yeah, we've had three black mayors before, but they've all been men. She'll be the 100th mayor of Philadelphia. So after 99 male mayors, we now have the first female mayor in Philadelphia.
That's like a big number, a big stamp on there. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where would you say Shar School's helped your sort of like knowledge in terms of politics? Or were you like a big politics person before coming to Shar School?
Well, I think the Shar School, you definitely get a different perspective. You have a lot of professors here who I would say, the thing that I think Shar School is able to do so well is given its proximity to DC, you're able to bring in professors who are just professors, but who work in their field. Right. I know you guys interviewed Bill Bowling or had an interview for Bill Bowling earlier. He was a lieutenant governor of Virginia. He worked in Virginia politics. He knows it. He's more than just a professor. Yeah. Not to discredit those who are just professors, but those who have interest out in the actual field, they are able to teach you and give you different perspectives as well as the students. Yeah. You're meeting students. I know you interviewed Shreyas beforehand. So different perspectives from Pennsylvania to Virginia to Arkansas. You get the wide range of perspectives of every state and every political affiliation here on campus.
And that's part of being in DC. You know, you go to DC, and if you like are interning or just like talking to people, a lot of these people who go to these other DC schools, a lot of people just in DC as a whole, they just come from all over the country, and it's a really like
that is the great thing about DC is you don't have a DC culture, you have an American worldwide culture of people coming from all over the world and all over the country to share their more opinions and perspectives here in DC and Virginia.
Yeah, because like I'm from Virginia, and I've definitely seen like California and West Coast people like click together.
West Coast represent.
Yeah, like, they definitely like click together, or like New York people, like or like Philly or whatever. So there definitely is like a lot of those clicky, like they're not clickiness, but definitely like groups within DC. Right. But as a whole, it very much is like a representation of the country. You know.
Yeah, I think I've seen this area be such a big melting pot, and it's really cool to be able to interact with that. Yeah. And I mean, not just what we were just talking about, figures from DC, not just professors. We've had people like Terry McAuliffe come on campus, and even Kamala Harris, who was met with a class, was able to speak with them, and that was just so amazing. So the proximity to DC really does a lot, and I'm so glad it's been able to do so.
It's funny you mentioned Kamala Harris because I believe there's a professor teaching a class the spring who was a staffer for Kamala Harris.
Okay. Yes,
teaching federal.
Dr. Richter.
Dr. Richter,
I'm taking her class.
Are you actually next semester?
Yeah, hey, there you go.
But it's federal oversights and investigations. It looks cool. I mean,
we're both taking it.
Yeah, we're both taking it. So come hang out with us in class.
And use Dr. Richter as a great resource.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for speaking with us.
No
We
problem.
very much enjoyed having you here.
Absolutely.
So we're going to cut to commercial break, and we'll be back with another segment for you guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
You're listening live to Improv for Mason here on WGMU Radio, heard WGMUradio.com.
You know, it wasn't my idea.
Today's show with our special guest interview transition for this team in the new conference.
Welcome to a special
It's been
edition of the
a
First
great
Pick.
transition for me personally. I love Mason.
The very talented David Keckner.
I'm great. How are you doing?
Reed, Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thanks, dude.
I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have Drew McGarry, successful author, writer. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMUradio.com.
There's a one hit out towards right field. They'll wave the run home. Here comes the Ponte. Here comes the throw. It is not in time. George Mason wins.
All right, thank you so much, guys. We are back, and we are now presenting to you a special issue forum held by Bridge at Mason in partnership with Student Government and League of Women Voters. Bridge at Mason is an organization whose mission is to find common partisan gaps. So this event was held in conjunction with college Republicans and Democrats at Mason and was a forum introspecting the student view of hot-button issues that will be at play at this year's election.
We are Democrats at Mason. My name is Kenzie Bonaspina, and I'm the president. This is John Dressel, and he is the vice president. We stand for the same progressive values and inclusion that make our campus great.
My name is Harry Lopez. I'm the chairman of College Republicans here at George Mason. And a part of what we do is we spread conservative values. We try to add stability to this economy. And right next to me is Ali Motamidi, my first vice chair.
I think that a solution to this issue and to this whole artificial propping up of tuition prices would be the elimination of the federal student loan programs and its replacement with a private program where individuals actually have to justify receiving university education and receiving the loans necessary to justify university education. I think that the pursuit of this policy would greatly diminish the ability for universities to prop up prices, to bid up and to provide an education that I think is not commensurate to the amount of tuition that we're paying.
The solution is not to get rid of government guidelines on loans. The solution is to join the rest of the modern world, increase federal subsidies for institutions of higher education. In most European countries, going to school is significantly cheaper than the United States. Also, the federal government is the guarantor of these loans, which means that they can modify the conditions on these loans. As well, not every student does need to go to college. We do believe, and the Democratic Party does believe, that higher education should be free, or should at least be like very low cost for state schools. However, college is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Public schools, state and local level, need to provide students opportunities to where college is not the only option for them. Obviously, schools have a huge part in, giving children the emotional education that they need to survive out in the world. Because going to school is not just about academics. It's not just about learning STEM. Going to school, especially for K through 12, should also be about learning these core life skills, learning how to adapt to the world that we live in, learning how to fit into the community around you, and really adapting those skills to become a holistically, a good citizen.
And when we talk about time management skills, I think that that's a basic life skill that should be taught by schools. I think that there is room for that, but I think that morality should stay to the household. I think it should stay in local communities and not be extended to the government.
Obviously, continuing to adopt solar and continuing to adopt wind is crucial, especially solar, because solar can, be retrofitted onto pre-existing homes. It can take homes off the grid and thus relieving pressure on the grid and relieving pressure on broader energy reserves. But nuclear energy also absolutely does play a role. Over the last few decades, nuclear energy has gotten significantly safer. A lot of the hype around nuclear energy that was going around in the 80s and 90s about its potential environmental and catastrophic effects, obviously those were concerns. But ever since the nuclear disasters of the 80s, and especially ever since Fukushima about 10 years ago, nuclear energy has gotten much more safe, which I think allows us to adopt an all of the above energy strategy, which would include things like solar and wind and nuclear.
And when we talk about nuclear energy and this whole concern about its efficacy and its impact on the environment, nuclear energy is the safest, most renewable, most secure, and most efficient form of energy there is, and it's cost effective. I think that the market would naturally go towards nuclear energy if it weren't so highly regulated in this country. You look at France, 80% of their energy is provided by nuclear energy.
One of the biggest things that we could do right now is start to tax the wealthy the way they should be. That's pretty much something that Democratic policies have always supported, is taxing fairly, increasing taxes on the rich. It's going to be able to relieve sort of the lower and the middle classes. Probably many members of this audience living in this Northern Virginia area, it's a struggle to find affordable housing. It's important that we implement that in our society. The child tax credit is another huge thing. It reduced child poverty by really enormous levels. It's important that we make sure that the child tax credit continues. Child poverty is something that it plagues every state really in the country, not just Virginia. It's important that we do what we can to prevent child poverty. And things like minimum wage and supporting labor unions, just in general supporting those who are in our workforce, making sure they're earning a fair wage, making sure that they have fair rights.
If you want an answer as to how we should support Virginians, it's simple. We need to engage in common sense fiscal measures that puts money back in the pockets of Virginians. These include tax cuts. These include spending cuts. These include deregulation measures to ensure that free enterprise can take hold in Virginia. This includes licensure transfers from other states to ensure that the labor pool is flexible, that they can move from one job to another without fear. This is how you bolster an economy.
All right, and we are back. I just have to say that I really do appreciate this interview or this, segment, because it is really cool to be able to see people, fighting to bridge partisan gaps, which has been probably one of the biggest issues in our country for a while now.
Yeah, and we have some breaking news. We'll cycle back onto this because this is a very pertinent issue. Yeah. Currently, as of right now, Belova has, for the House seat, Belova has 72.87%, while Mohammed has 26.92%. Belova being the Democrat and Mohammed being the Republican. And then for the Marston Senate seat, it's 70.8% for Marsden. He's a Democrat in the Senate. And then for Vafidas, he has 28.99% of the votes as of right now. But this is just fresh news, but it's up for change, I believe, is what we're being told.
We are getting new numbers like every second right now. So this was given to us maybe like 2 minutes ago, and it has been changing rapidly since then. So please keep an eye out on for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the main site, or whatever site you choose to follow. But yeah, this is what we have right now. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what we just saw and what we just talked about. Obviously, there were some issues up for debate.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to start with
what you want to talk about? So one of the big issues, I guess, or not big in my opinion, was the sort of agreement that between the Democrats and the Republicans on nuclear energy. Within renewables and green energy, like the entire sort of segment of, I guess, climate change policy, energy policy, environmental policy, there's always been like a big debate on the merits, the saliency of like adopting nuclear as like a serious generation source of power. And in the past, there was so in the 70s there was a strong support for it, but then in the 80s and 90s that progressively soured as some like nuclear incidents happened, and for a while, nuclear power has remained stagnant as a share of the the U.S.'s energy and generation. But in terms of movement on positions on this topic, it's really interesting that nuclear has at least on Mason has bipartisan support between both sides, and for different reasons. Like the Republicans mentioned, it's low cost, and if it wasn't for government's laws preventing interference, then it would be doing better. While Democrats said it's any sustainable sort of power is good sustainable power.
They talked about solar energy, especially being more incorporated into like residential homes, etc. And the importance of that, and it is nice to see bipartisan support for the issue of renewable energy, or at least nuclear
to some
energy.
degree. As we saw earlier with Vafidas, he definitely doesn't necessarily agree 100% on that. But it seems like it's a growing consensus between at least in our generation.
On our campus as well. And something else that we learned was that we do have some disagreement on federal loans, and one being with the issue that on the Republican side that federal loans are just not effective or not efficient, and that privatizing these would be a better form, whereas the Democrats are vehemently disagreeing with this, saying that federal loans are we need to have more government subsidization, especially when it comes to higher education. I have to say that I agree, mostly because as being someone who's hoping to pursue secondary higher education like law school or grad school, I think it's important that it's something that is important for a lot of students. Like, let's forget even like secondary higher education. We have students taking out loans just for undergraduate, and so that's definitely a difficult task to think about, to discuss, and to go with, especially you need to have good credit, etc. There's a lot of factors into play, and the disagreement was very clear there, at least in this debate on campus.
I think those are really salient points. That I don't want to throw my hat in the ring either way, but I think I think on top of what you've been saying, that there's been some concern that like private loans can be more predatory. But I guess to raise the counterfactual, or like the play devil's advocate, I guess, not calling Republicans devils or anything like that. I'm just saying the other end of the spectrum here, just for more like biased reporting here.
Absolutely.
I guess like to sort of build off what the Republicans were saying in the panel, I guess what they were saying was that if government took a step back from loans, then the private market would sort itself out. As Republicans usually say.
Be able to come and that support.
But and it also comes back to like the economic idea that like the government is crowding out other firms, and that if the government wasn't offering such low interest rates, then private companies could lower their interest rates or for loans, and they would have like less competition. But just to play, like I said, I don't really fall on either end, but just want to make sure.
And just to keep quick cap on that, while we come to you with some new numbers from our current election, with Belova for in the House seat, we have 70.3% of the votes, with Almira Mohammed pulling 29.4% of the votes. Marsden in the Senate with 67.4% of the votes, and Bafiades with 32.3% of the votes. And election day results are now coming in. Final results are now coming in. So please keep an eye out. Again, these will probably be shifting just a little bit as the numbers are coming to a close, but you can see for yourself which candidate has won in your district.
Yeah, it's interesting that only now, election day, votes have been pouring in.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been a solid number floating around, like the percentage of absentee ballots, but just from sort of like the data we've seen,
Yeah.
it looks like it's a surprising amount of
mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
And I think part of that has to do with the fact that we are having students vote in Fairfax that are receiving mail-in ballots from maybe different counties or parts of Virginia that they live in. I know I for one really do depend on absentee ballots or mail-in ballots because I vote in my home state. So it's really important. I would say that it's an important issue when it comes to the voting process.
Yeah, definitely. More voting access, I would say, probably is a good thing. I think most people agree. It's probably
it's a good thing.
Being able to exercise your civic right, and it's a civic duty really. So to vote is important, and expanding access to people who make it more convenient is ultimately I would say a net positive for society.
Absolutely.
So it's a very good thing to see, and hopefully hopefully we'll see some more data coming in before we can shut off for the nights. But we'll stay posted.
Yeah, but again, I really did like seeing this debate. Again, I think we are seeing much more political action on campus. And especially from our students, it makes us really proud.
Yeah, I mean, to talk a little bit more about this the sort of debate. I've written articles in the past about the different political clubs on campus. If you go to Mason Votes, our sort of like news arm, political arm of here at Mason, I wrote an article on like the different sort of perspectives each club had on elections and just general topics as a whole. And so it was really interesting, and I really like having more sort of discussions on campus between clubs because up till now we really haven't seen a lot of that sort of like debates, and debates are good and discussions are good. In my opinion, so it's a good thing to see.
Absolutely.
And I've been going to, and I encourage other people to go to Bridge, the club that's the host of this event. Yeah, because it's been, it's free food, which is a big plus, but there's also, it's a good way to discuss topics with a wide diversity of opinions, and it's really
I actually
fun.
want to shout out one of my students that I TA, who's a huge part of it. I don't know if she's okay with me saying her name, but shout out to you, you know who you are. Great job. All of you.
Everyone, all the officers I've gotten to meet in the past, and they all are really wonderful people who really care about the club. So it's a good thing, that we're holding it. And obviously it's bore some fruit.
So great job to everyone who did participate in the club, who showed up, who, spoke on that panel. Wonderful job. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. That is all for tonight. Thank you so much again for joining us on this special MCN coverage of the election. You can keep up to date with news on and off campus if you follow us on Instagram at MCN on TV, on Twitter and Facebook at Mason Cable Network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, all full interviews will be posted there. I am Daksha Magesh.
And I'm Gabriel Yossick. Thank you for voting, Patriots. Good night.
Good night.